Al Gore wrote a book called Assault on Reason. I don't know if you guys have read it, but it's really good. And in it, he covers a bunch of things. But one thing he says is that television is ruining democracy because there's only a few rich guys who own a few stations and kind of control everything, just like back in feudal times when there was a few rich guys who owned, all the sources of information. And then came the printing press, and people learn to read and write their own stuff, and there was a democratization of this information. And I'm really paraphrasing here, but then comes TV, and he talks about TV's influence on the brain in a way that sort of puts you in this semi-hypnotic state where you're always lulled into kind of inactivity because of it. And he jokes that if our ancestors had TV on the savannas, we wouldn't be here right now. Some saber tooth would just come in from the side. But what's funny to me too is that he's like, we're going to change that. We're going to democratize TV. We're going to change everything. It's only a few rich guys that own a few stations. And I'm thinking, Al, you're a rich guy who owns a station. So what I learned, what I gathered from that is, rather than just try to get control of one station and democratize it, why couldn't we take something like what's already happening with American Idol, a hugely popular show? People are interacting with it with their phones. Now they're just voting, but Twitter allows you to express an opinion, even if it is 140 characters or less. It's a couple of sentences, and it's enough to express an opinion on a debate, a presidential debate, for example, which is what we did with Current. They broadcast the debate live, and you could Twitter during the debate, and you could be like, "This is ridiculous. I don't agree with this," or "I hate that tie," or whatever you wanted. And the Twitters would show up, or the tweets would show up on the bottom third, and so it was very interactive, and you could have this kind of interaction with television, which I think is really interesting. So, to sum that up, you have web users, television users, mobile phone users, and we're building APIs that connect to all of them, allow people to build on top of this entire network. And so who the heck knows what's going to happen. I like to say that if there's 3 sentences that define Twitter, the first 2 put some fidelity on Twitter and explain what it is, but the third one is we don't know. And that's been something that has been really useful for us because we created this API very early, which just means we opened up the technology in a way that anyone could go ahead and build applications that essentially do everything that Twitter does, but they could create better, more interesting, or different flavors of interactivity with Twitter. And as a result, as much traffic as the website gets, there's at least 3 times more traffic that are going in aggregate through all these wonderful applications that people are using and preferring to use instead of Twitter. So we didn't know that was going to happen. We just thought we'd put an API out there and some geeks would hack on it and do some cool stuff. But we didn't know that it was going to be sort of one of the biggest drivers of traffic and one of the biggest ways that Twitter would grow around the world. So we need to remember that as we get more popular and more successful, that we don't get so clever we think we know things. Especially coming out of Google, where it's like, I work at Google, I must be a genius. Like, we did amazing things, therefore I must be a super genius. I'm going to start my own company. Well, that didn't work. I wonder if they'll take me back. It's easy to fall into that. So that's another thing that I don't know if you guys want to hear about this or not, but we're really focused on, and as I'm sure you guys are here, on what the culture is at Twitter, and trying to answer the question, what does it mean to start a company now? It's a 2-year-old company. What are our other obligations beyond trying to create a wonderful product experience and create a great experience for employees to come into the office? But what beyond that? What are some of the other responsibilities from a company perspective? So introducing corporate social responsibility very early on into the company, so that it becomes ingrained, so that it's not like, okay, let's make a few billion dollars and then we'll give a little bit to poor people. Let's build it in so that it scales with the system. And so some of the work that we've been doing with Scott Harrison at Charity Water and the Malaria No More People, which are really just the UN Foundation, and they have a few other things going on, and a few other people that we're trying to get things going with, and just some culture stuff that we're really building on, like taking the idea of something that was called TGIF at Google, which was the founders would get up and they would talk to the team every week, and they would say, here's what happened this week, and here are our numbers, or here's what launched. And we took that, but we flipped it around, and instead of the founders getting up, everybody gets up and does 1 or 2 slides in a big, hugely messy keynote file, because everyone just sends their files to me, and then I put them all together in this giant thing. And some people do this ridiculous animation and the other thing, and it's really funny. But it gives everyone an opportunity to say what they're up to and or complain or whatever they want to do. But our biggest sort of concern is that Twitter, having found success really early, would be like that child actor that grows up to be all freaky and weird. And how do we, how do we avoid that? How do we become Ron Howard? Successful Hollywood director, but he was also a child actor. So we think the answer to that is being over-communicative internally and focusing on cultural things and focusing on what, meaning makers, like what's getting you here. Why are you working here as opposed to somewhere else? And it can't just be because it's the money or something like that. It has to be for another reason. And that's also making it really difficult to hire people, because we're super picky. Like, they need to be funny, and they need to use Twitter, and they just need to fit right. You know what I mean? But at the same time, we're trying to hire quickly because we have so much to do. A lot of people are shocked, when we tell them that, like, yeah, we have 30 employees. I mean, we're up to close to 50 now, because we've been making great efforts over the past 6 months to really turn the heat on in terms of hiring. But people come into our office and they're like, "That's it. This is it. Is this the satellite office?" And we're like, "This is all we got." And those 3 guys, the operations team. Those 12 guys are the engineers, and so stop complaining. No, but what they've been able to do, and the scale of the operation, it's truly commendable, because they've been able to do some really great stuff with very few resources. Especially, the coming out of the technical maelstrom was really an interesting. I don't even know if I don't know what time it is, but. How we were able to get out of that and pull ahead is an interesting story in and of itself, I think.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's sort of a testament to teamwork and kind of introspection and realizing how important communication is. What happened was, we started out, me and Jack and a part-time programmer putting together a prototype, and then people thought it was cool, so we got more audio employees to help work with us. And when you're like 8 or 10 people, everybody knows every part of this simple system. And then as the system grows and gets more complicated, and some people will move on, they don't work there anymore, other people move to a different part of it. And then what happened with us is we started getting really popular while we were still just this one kind of ball of twine, and what would happen is the whole site would go down. Well, actually, the whole service, including API, everything would just go down.
We remember.
And the first thing would be, okay, something inside the ball of twine broke. Does anyone know what did? And then so unfortunately, we would lose all this time doing these forensics to trying to figure out what was it that broke. And invariably, it was some, tiny thing. And it was like, does anyone know who wrote this code? Does anyone know this? And it got to the point where they were like, well, that guy wrote that code, but he's in Europe right now. And we're like, oh, what are we going to do? All right, write a quick thing to fix that. And, so what we had to do was, we had all these great ideas, like rewrite everything, start over, start from scratch, but we couldn't do that because it was growing. And starting from scratch is like a huge bet. You could end up in the same problem. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we just began to decouple, make several subsystems out of the one big system, break them out into smaller parts, visualize everything with all kinds of charts and graphs, so you can see how the subsystems are doing in relation to the overall system, and you can kind of monitor them like you would a patient at a hospital. So break those all out, and that had an interesting effect, which was it created a much more craftsman-like approach to that subsystem between two coders, for example.